Hello world, it's Fearfire here, and I am making a League of Legends guide, kind of an overview towards the strategy aspect of League of Legends, and it's targeted more towards the intermediate player, not going to be talking about super advanced strategies, but I'm sure that lots of people can learn from this, probably targeted towards more of like gold players that are looking to really cement their knowledge of League of Legends in like general game sense and stuff like that. But I'm also going to introduce each topic at a more basic level so that new players will be able to still get something out of this guide and not be lost by what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into things. Let's start with pre-game kind of strategy and champion select. So I'm going to start with banning because people are always wondering what should I ban, and there's a couple different approaches to this. Like, the most important thing to keep in mind is that if you're planning on running a specific team composition, like AoE team comp or poke team comp, then you need to ban out things that specifically counter that comp. Like, if you're going to be doing a poke comp where you just sit back and throw skills at people, like Nidalee, Jace, I don't know, Varus, Twisted Fate, Gragas, Janna, people that could just harass from a distance and get the enemy low before moving in or before sieging the tower or something like that, they need to ban out people that have hard initiate, like Malphite or I don't know, Twisted Fate or Pantheon, anyone like that, Nocturne, because if they're able to initiate on you while you're trying to poke them down, then it's irrelevant that you have all this poke because you're going to be stuck in a team fight the whole time. Um, Another example might be if you're running an AoE comp and they grab Maokai, well, there's 20% reduced damage on all your skills, so that's the most important thing to keep in mind. But other things, if there's people that your team just hates playing against, you could just ban them. Tanks are often banned in, like, I don't know, in lower levels of ranked play and stuff. Um, I know, like, my team that I play with a lot of times, we hate playing against a Mumu because he's just, like, so against our style. As we often like group up and try to, I don't know, force engagements, and a Mumu can just render your entire team useless for a couple seconds. So we'll often ban a Mumu, or any type of flavor of the month champions, the FOTMs, the people that are really strong right now. You could just, if you're not comfortable playing against them, then you should ban them, and that's basically it. So let's move on to the team composition and actually selecting a team. And I'm gonna move through this kind of fast because it's important, but it's not like it's something that most people already know. So the most important thing is to make sure like you have someone in each role. You have a tank, you have someone who could initiate or disengage depending on like what type of composition you're running, um, and also like balanced damage. Like people don't realize that, like, yeah, it's bad if you're all AD or you're all AP and you're all dealing magic damage because they could build magic resist, but like the bigger problem to that is that if you're all AP, you have a lot of burst damage, but you don't have any consistent damage, and after 2 or 3 seconds of a team fight, you can't do much for the next 5 or 6 seconds until your abilities come off cooldown. And same with if you're running a bunch of AD, you might have some consistent damage, but you won't have enough burst damage to like you know quickly kill someone that gets out of position. If their carry runs up and just starts auto attacking you out of nowhere, you can't just turn on them and melt them in 1 second because you don't have enough burst damage. So make sure you have balanced team, some burst, some sustain damage, AD, AP, some tank, someone who could initiate, because there are definitely going to be times when you want to force a fight where you might, for example, see like their carry farming bot, and you're like, okay, we need to fight now. So you need someone that can initiate. So that's basically the basics there, and I'm not really going to talk about runes, mastery, summoner spells. Those are different for each champion. Has like their own runes or masteries or spells depending on their role. But in general, if you're like an AD carry, you're gonna probably want 21 in offense, so you can make sure to maximize your output. Same with AP carries, or if you're a bruiser or a tank, you need the 21 in defense so that you could soak up as much damage as possible. So let's move into the laning section of this guide. So first of all, the most important things, it depends of course on which lane you are, and I'm going to be doing some more like lane specific guides in the future. But the most important thing is to get kill the minions, and it's pretty basic. 20 minions is about equal to 1 kill, and this is how you get your items and all of that. So you have to place the focus on getting the minion kills more than on harassing them, because harassing them is great, and if you're able to get them low, that's great. But if you're not actually able to kill them, then the fact that you're winning all these trades isn't too relevant, because if they're keeping up in CS and you're not actually getting kills, the only real advantage you're getting is maybe force them out of lane every now and then. So you have to make sure that you are keeping up in minion kills. You should be able to get consistently 70 minions by 10 minutes. Like, that's a good goal for intermediate players. And then farther on in the game, as the time starts to progress, you probably want to get about 10 CS per minute. So if you're at 20 minutes, a pro level CS would be about 200 CS at that point. So that's just something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and talk about harassing a little. There are a few times that you really want to harass your opponent in lane, and this is like if you have a significant advantage over them. Like if you're ranged in their melee, you could usually trade with them really well. Like, it'll be easy to land your skills, and you won't have a problem, harassing them without taking much damage in return. If you have sustain, like lifesteal or heals or something, and they don't have any sort of sustain, then you're going to be able to always end up, at the end of the day, you're going to be at higher health than they are after the trade. Similarly, if you counterpicked a champion, then you have to take advantage of that. It means that some ability, or maybe just your champion's overall kit, is really strong against the enemy champion, and if all you're doing is just farming, although it is definitely important to get the farm, you also have to be able to fit in harass in between getting the CS, because otherwise the fact that you counterpick them is going to be largely irrelevant. Also, one of the most important things to keep in mind when you're harassing someone is that it's important to keep wards up in your lane, because it's really easy to get ganked when you're so focused on trading with the enemy or something. If you're playing Casted against a Karthus and you're trying to R onto him and then EQ him or something, you're gonna now be positioned very far forward in the lane, and it's really easy for the jungler to come in behind and gank you. So the best times to trade with people or to go all in on someone are when you see the jungler ganking a different lane or something like that. But in general, just remember it's important to keep wards up in your lane. So let's go ahead and talk about warding now. So it's different for each lane, but all lanes it's important to keep wards up in. And I'll talk more about this when I do my lane specific guides. But in general, if you only have one ward in your mid lane, then you want to ward it on the side that your tower is on. So like for blue lane, for blue side, it would be the top lane bush, because this is, and then you hug that part of the lane because you have vision on that side, and it's also the shortest distance to your tower, in case you do get ganked and you have to run to your tower. And also it'll be warded on the enemy's side that they have red buff on that side. Basically, there's 3 jungle camps on that side instead of just 2 jungle camps, and most of the ganks come from after the jungler has done red for mid lane. So if you only have one ward, you usually put it on that side of the lane, and then you just position yourself so that you're closer towards the top half of the lane than the bottom half, so you stay on that half of the minions. And for top lane, you usually ward the river and then maybe also the top tri-bush, so that you have good vision of top lane, and bottom lane you ward all around. It's just important that you are able to see whether or not the jungler is about to gank you before you decide to go all in on someone. And so yeah, during the lane, of course, you're focusing on getting the minions, and then after that you're watching the map. Basically, you're constantly checking the map to make sure to check for the jungler. First of all, if you see him in one lane, then it means he's not in your lane, and you have 10-20 seconds of of time that you're not about to get ganked, that you could do whatever you want to the enemy laner. You could take this chance to go all in on them and try to get a kill without any fear, without any risk of someone showing up in your lane. But the more important part is that you could see if the enemy laner goes missing. If you're mid lane and you see the enemy laner, the enemy top laner leave his lane and run down, then in about 10 seconds he's going to be at your lane. So you finish up doing whatever it is you're doing in your lane, pushing the wave, and then you just get back. And at this point, it might just be safe to go back and buy some items or something. But you have to know where people are on the map, especially like later on in the game, like I don't know, even just 10 minutes in. If you see the enemy jungler gank top lane, then you and your jungler can go take dragon basically for free, because you know the enemy jungler isn't there to contest it, so your jungler should be able to pretty much secure a free dragon for you guys. More things about warding. Generally, any place on the map where like 3 paths cross, so like usually in the jungle where 3 or 4 paths cross, is a good place to just drop a ward, because that'll give you good vision of the enemy jungler, a good chance to spot where he is. You could always ward any of the buffs, especially if you're really winning your lane. Like if you're middle and you're really winning your lane, then you could go ahead and ward the enemy blue buff, and when their blue buff spawns, you could go and try to contest it, because you're going to be so much stronger than your enemy mid lane that you don't have to be worried about going into potential 1v2, especially if you have your jungler with you. Other places, early game, it's important to have Baron warded, and you could ward like the small bushes by Baron or by Dragon, so that if they had a pink at Dragon or Baron, they wouldn't be able to clear your ward, yet you will still be able to see people heading towards it. There's also like inside Baron, right inside Baron, there's that little spot that you could drop a ward, that if they had a pink ward outside of the Baron pit, they wouldn't be able to see your ward. Also, if they have a pink ward like just inside Baron pit, then you could ward like above Baron a bit, and you'll be able to see them heading into the Baron pit without their pink ward being in range of your sight ward. On a similar note, we could talk about buff control, which is, it's also kind of like global positioning. So I already talked about how junglers don't want to be ganking top 10 minutes in, because it gives the other team a shot at a free dragon. But on a higher note, any lane that's doing that, if mid lane it goes to gank top, then then the other team has a free shot at taking a dragon, knowing that you'll have a numbers advantage. General buff control has a lot to do with whether or not you're winning or losing your lane. A lot of people that win their lane don't know what to do with their advantage, or they're not actually able to use their advantage as to as great of lengths as they would like. So if you're winning your lane, a good idea is to ward the enemy's buff on whatever side. So if you're top lane, say your bottom team, blue team, top lane, then you could ward the enemy's red buff, and then when you see their jungler go to it, or if their top lane or mid lane, whatever, goes to the red buff, you could try to follow them there, because you're so much stronger than the enemy, laner, that you'll potentially be able to win the 2v1, and especially if your jungler comes in as a 2v2 and you're so much stronger that you're basically able to take the enemy's buffs without much fear of retaliation, because you're so much stronger than them. I'm going to talk a little bit about split pushing now. Basically, lots of people have it in their mind that it's a good idea to split push, at times that it's not. If you're an AD carry, you don't want to be split pushing, bottom when Baron is up, because the enemy team can just go force a Baron. I mean, no one wants to be bottom when Baron's up. If it's 15 minutes in, then the enemy team's going to have a hard time killing Baron in time. But if it's 30 minutes in, the enemy can kill Baron in no time flat, and that's going to be a problem for your team. The exception is if you're someone with some sort of long-ranged ultimate like Shen or Twisted Fate Pantheon, that could just use their ultimate to quickly close the gap and join the fight, or if you have teleport, something like that. It's a good idea to split push, because either you'll draw someone down, in which case you could then teleport back to your team and have it be a 5v4 for a little bit, or you'll get free damage on the tower, or at the very least, what'll usually happen is as soon as they see you in a different lane, they'll just force a fight on the rest of your team, and you'll be forced to teleport to your team and fight with them. But at least you got the lane pushing, so they won't be able to, if they did win the team fight, they won't get so much out of it, because they'll be forced to back off and stop whatever lane you got pushing, from reaching their turret or whatever. I'm going to touch on team fighting, but team fighting is more of something that is that's dependent on whatever specific team comp you're running and stuff like that. It's something that's kind of hard to explain. The most important thing in team fighting is just your positioning. If you're a tank, then you need to be up front. You need to be either going for their carry, or peeling for your own carry, or just positioning yourself in such a way that you're blocking skill shots and stuff like that to help protect your team. If you're a carry, you need to stay in the back, and basically, if you're AD carry, you should be constantly auto attacking, even if it means you're just auto attacking the tank. It's better than not doing any damage. And if you're an AP carry, if you're a mage or some sort of assassin, your general job usually is to go for the enemy carry and try to kill them. But something that happens a lot of times is people will dive in for the enemy carry, and then they'll end up dying. And if you got the enemy carry, then it might be worth it. Like, it might be worth going 1-for-1 if you weren't very strong and the enemy carry was really fed. But in general, it's not a good idea to go 1-for-1, because then your team's magic damage is 0 after that. And, it all depends on your team. In general, it's better to just stay alive, even if it means that you weren't able to get the kill, because it's usually better than taking the risk of dying, basically, and not getting anything out of it. Okay, next thing I'm going to talk about is ending games, and it's something that a lot of people have problems with. They'll have a lead, but they won't be able to actually end the game, and then the enemy catches up, and your advantage is gone. So the general strategy towards ending a game is that you take Baron, and then with that buff, with the regeneration, and therefore the sustain that buff gives you, you go and siege a tower, and you just you attack the tower until it dies. The AD carry's job is going to be to continuously attack the tower while everyone else basically screens for them and clears the wave and pokes down the enemy team, and then you just rinse and repeat. And it might take a few waves before you're able to get the tower down, but if you have Baron buff, you're going to be able to siege towers no problem. So how do you get to that point? In general, so there's a few different ways that you could take Baron reliably. If you're far ahead and you're not worried about fighting a team fight, then just go and take Baron, and if the enemy comes, then just turn on them and kill them. And then you don't even need Baron, you could just go and take towers. If it's pretty close and you don't necessarily think that you have a better team fight than them, then the most important thing is to establish map control. So you're just going to be warding everywhere and following your support around. Maybe they'll have oracles or drop pink wards so that they could try to... It's going to be a battle for who has more wards on the map. And then once you have more wards than them, you'll be able to catch people out, basically. If you ward their red buff and you see their AD carry go to take red, then your team, assuming you're staying together, can move as 5 to the enemy red buff and try to catch the enemy AD carry. So the most important part of this time is to be staying together and to have vision at all times, so that you could tell if the enemy is split, and if they're split and you're not, you force a fight and you're very likely to win that fight. And then you go on to getting Baron, getting towers, and whatnot. If you're behind, then you have a different sort of approach to the game, as it gets later into the game. You're trying to stall so that you could slowly catch up and close that gold difference. And the best way you do that is still with wards, because you need to make sure you're not getting caught, and you need to be able to see if the enemy if they're all moving towards top lane to try to push your top lane down. Then you need to be able to move towards top lane. And the most important thing about stalling is just wave clear. You have to be able to clear waves. Just clear the minions and force the enemy to tank the tower. And if you're fighting under a tower, then even if you are a little bit behind, if it's a 5v5 but you have a tower, it's going to make up for the fact that you're a little bit behind in gold or whatnot. If you have someone that's good at split pushing, or has teleport or something like that, you could have them go ahead and split push and force pressure with some other part of the map, and then just teleport in when the team fight starts or whatever. And that's also a good way to help close the gold difference, and also put pressure on the enemy team to force them to start making plays, maybe earlier than they want to, because if they just let you split push, then they're gonna come out behind. That's pretty much it. If you're ahead, then you take Baron and towers. In general, you kill all the outer towers first, because those are much harder to defend. So yeah, you make sure that you have all the outer towers, then you siege usually mid tower, because that'll give you the most map control, because yeah, then you could either do top or bot, but oftentimes it's popular to go for the enemy's bottom tower, because then they'll have to leave someone bottom lane defending against super minions. Assuming you got the inhibitor, then they'll have to be defending against the super minions bottom lane, and next time Baron's up, you could just run up to Baron and get it virtually uncontested. And if you're behind, then the general idea is just going to be stalling until you've closed up the gold difference. And this works especially if you have like a better late game team. If you have like a carry like Tristana or Kog'Maw, or if you have someone on your team that's really good at wave clearing like Anivia or Twisted Fate, then you won't have much of a problem stalling till later game, and you should be confident in your ability to win team fights later. So let's do a quick summary of what we talked about. So, pre-game, it's important to ban people that are that are counters to the type of team comp you're running. And when you are choosing your team, make sure you have someone who can initiate. Make sure you have a tank. Make sure you have balanced damage. And no matter what team comp you're running, it's important to have these types of things, because you have to still be able to engage. You have to be able to wave clear in case you fall behind. You have to have someone that's good late game in case, again, you fall behind. You need to have someone that you could rely on to carry you late game and stuff like that. During the laning phase, emphasize getting the CS and watching the map. Harass them a lot if you have some sort of advantage over them, like you're ranged in their melee, or you have sustain and they don't have sustain, and stuff like that. Make sure you keep your lane warded and ward across the map so that you have vision on their jungler, so that you have buff control, stuff like that. If the enemy jungler goes to gank top, then it's pretty much a free dragon for you, and you have to be able to take advantage of situations like that. And then during team fights, make sure you're grouped up and have wards up, especially if the enemy team has people like Fiddlesticks who are just gonna, hide on the other side of a wall and then ult in during the team fight. If you have vision on them, you might be able to stop them from ulting by stunning them or something, or at the very least you could fan out and minimize the damage and stuff like that. So it's important to always have wards up at all times, and fight for a reason. Oftentimes I see people fight for no reason, and if unless you're like super far ahead and you're sure that if you win the fight, you're sure that you'll win the fight first of all, and that you're sure that afterwards you'll be able to take a tower or something. But usually you want to fight for a reason. For example, go bottom lane and fight, try to get a kill bottom lane, and then use that advantage to get dragon, or use it to get a tower, stuff like that. If you're just a little bit ahead and you're fighting for no reason, you're just giving the enemy team a chance to catch up. You're giving your team a chance to throw the game, basically. So make sure you fight first for a reason. And finally, when it gets towards the end of the game, ending the game, make sure you have to still keep wards up so that you can try to catch the enemy, try to take Baron, and then use that buff to siege towers, and first kill the outer towers, then move towards the inner towers. And when you're sieging towers, it's the AD carry's job to just keep hitting the tower, and the rest of your team to wave clear and poke at the enemy, and counter initiate if the enemy initiates on you. And if you're behind, then you're just trying to stall, just clear waves, farm, maybe split push if you have some sort of ability, to rejoin the fight in case the enemy engages and stuff like that. And yeah, that's basically it. So I hope you learned something about general game sense, kind of the strategy, what you should be doing at different points in the game, and stuff like that. I'll be making some much more advanced, like lane specific guides in the future. I'll be starting with mid lane first, and talking about the higher level strategies of actual like minion flow and minion control, and some picks, counter picks, just lane specific guides. So if you enjoyed the video and want to stay up to date, then please subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the Rift.